typically say that the main slate is just around the corner, but this week it's kind of not because we're talking here on Wednesday to account for the Thanksgiving holiday because I don't want to talk to you tomorrow. No offense. Just don't want to be here. So we're going to do this on Wednesday. Give you an overview of the Week 12 main NFL DFS slate. Talk through what we're keeping our eye on, which game stacks we like initially, and hopefully at least set the table for you to have a successful week. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, once again, a happy Thanksgiving to you. How are you doing on this glorious, glorious Wednesday?
Good. I ran into this dilemma a few weeks ago. You said things, and I didn't know which of two ways to go. So
let's just go through all the options again. Let's go. Here we go.
See if I can remember. You said that you typically say the main slate's right around the corner, which I think is, as everyone knows, your catchphrase. It's on your T-shirts that just the main slate is right around the corner. That's cringe. Like your. I've never heard you say that.
So thank goodness. I thought you were serious. No, I was like, oh, do I actually say that?
But you said you typically say that. So I was like, is that a thing you say that I don't know about?
I don't know. I hope not. It's stupid. It's a stupid phrase. It was like, what corner? What corner are we talking about?
The proverbial corner.
Yeah. Okay.
The royal corner, as they say.
Sure.
Is that the second thing?
Is that a Barksdale corner or which one is that? Okay. Anyway, number two.
You said, and this is probably like a subliminal thing in your mind, is that something about setting the table for this week 12 slate.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I feel like that's the one I should have went with. But
well, when you're eating pizza on Thanksgiving, Brandon, do you need to set the table or do you just like free ball it?
We're not doing pizza this year. We're setting the table.
Wow.
But yeah,
sell out.
I mean,
sell out. It's a way to not stick to your morals.
Look, I'm all for non-traditional Thanksgiving. Non-traditional Thanksgiving is the way to go.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm not going to push back. I've given up on like shaming people for doing what they like, especially post-pandemic. Not since the beginning of the pandemic. I'm like, yeah, do whatever makes you happy. It's fine. So I'm not going to shame you. But you know, I am sad that you're not going to go all in on the Gadula strategy of just pizza whenever.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the strategy still is pizza whenever for me and the wife. So okay. that strategy's still there.
I respect that. Very good. Okay, so if you are looking for a Thanksgiving DFS preview, we recorded that yesterday. It's up on the FanDuel YouTube page right now. It's also up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. If you're listening to this on Wednesday or early Thursday, go check that out. Get your lineups in. It's a poop slate, but whatever. We can have fun with it anyway. We can still win some money. That's super inspiring, I'm sure. numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed for that. Also, if you're watching right now on the FanDuel YouTube page, hit the like button there and hit subscribe because both those do help us out quite a bit. A lot of good stuff here on the FanDuel YouTube page each and every weekday. And we also have a lot of good stuff, non-NFL stuff on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, NBA, NHL via Tom Vecchio, UFC usually via Austin Swain. None this week, I believe. I don't think there is a card this week. So taking that one off, which is good. Good for Austin to get some family time there. And then back next week with that. PGA back after the new year as well. So hit subscribe on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Did I snub something?
No, you said you gotta click the like button, and then you said you got to hit it, and neither time did you say smash. And I don't think it registers.
Smash that like button.
I don't think it registers on YouTube unless they smash that like button.
I'm requesting you don't smash that like button because I value all of you as viewers / listeners and don't want your computers / phones to break. So don't smash it, please. Gently press, gently tap. Gently tap. Little nudge in the like button can help us all out here without sending your computer into oblivion. Okay, the NFL season rolls on with Week 12 this weekend, and FanDuel is partnering with EA Sports to bring you this week's NFL Sunday Million Daily Fantasy Contest. Enter the NFL Sunday Million Marquee Contest presented by EA Sports Madden NFL 22 this weekend to compete for a chance to win a share of $1.5 million in prizes. Simply build best player roster while staying under the salary cap and follow along as the games unfold with 10 games scheduled for Sunday afternoon. There's plenty of big names to choose from and plenty of opportunity for a big payday. Kickoff is right around the corner. There we go. I think that's why I say it. Anyway, head to FanDuel.com today and get in on the action now. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. Suddenly I have an urge to skip this podcast and play Madden. It's like the messaging works somehow. So kudos to you, EA Sports. You got me at least. And I'm not distracted and thinking about my Chad Pennington old dynasty rosters on the early Madden days. Anyway, let's take a look at the slate overview here for week number 12. And Brandon, the big thing that stands out to me is that quarterback sucks. What stands out to you?
Yes, quarterback's bad, but also running back is very good. We have a lot of stud running backs to pick from. Not all of them are in flawless spots, though. So we got to determine whether they, which guys are worth their salaries. And realistically, all these guys are worth their salaries, but which of them stand out from the rest for our, to be the actual core plays we go with? Because I'm not going to sit here and nitpick Jonathan Taylor, but of course he's got a tough matchup. So how does that kind of stack up? So that's, I think, really figuring out running back, really ranking these backs from a priority standpoint is what it's going to take for me to feel comfortable for Sunday.
That is the one consolation of a bad quarterback slate is we do have 6 running backs with salaries of $8,000 or higher, and I can make a case for all of them. I think that they all are worthy of where they're at, which does allow us to nitpick, and I'm fine with that. I like nitpicking. I think it's kind of fun. It also gives us situations where we might be able to get some of these guys at reduced popularity because there are good options, and we saw that with John Taylor last week. Maybe it's, I don't know, like Najee Harris this week, something like that. Like there could be guys who are in good spots who could be good tournament plays. Now, the problem is we're recording this on Wednesday. We're not going to have a great grasp on who will be popular, who will not. We'll talk through our view of things, give you an overview. The other thing that I want to stress here is that because we're recording Wednesday, things will change. We will know about more injuries as the week goes along. So keep an eye on the news and be reactive without being overreactive. And I think the way that I would do this is like set aside time, extra time Sunday morning before you fill out lineups. If you are like me and do them all Sunday morning by hand, set aside extra time Sunday morning to think through the situation and think through, okay, if I had a player with this projected workload in this game, how would I handle them? Taking the name out of it and stuff like that. So, it's a week where the content, the stuff around this site will be less efficient than usual. And I think that does give us a good chance to be, more optimal than the field, which is a fun chance we don't always get, I guess is the way that I would phrase that.
Yeah, I mean, people obviously have other stuff going on for the most part. And content will be a little bit more outdated, including this podcast, which, and like, I know how that sounds, but even when we record Thursday, it's like, sometimes by Friday, a lot of the stuff we say is deemed not even entirely irrelevant, but very different. Like the plays we love might not be as big of loves because something else opened up. But I will say one of the things that I love doing with this podcast is going over the trends, because for the most part, the trends we discuss are not really injury dependent. They're not just saying, hey, here's our favorite plays, and if something changes, that part's irrelevant. But especially early on in the season, when we talk about like strategy, that stuff really applies. And so that's why I like what we do with this podcast. It's not like a pat on the back, but a lot of stuff that we do, I think everyone else can apply, and it's learning how to look at relevant samples, looking more into splits that other people might not. And it doesn't really take a whole lot of extra work. And you can get, like you said, that leverage, especially if you're, having these long-term views of offenses, and you might not need to scramble as much on Sunday if you feel good with what you've seen from a longer sample.
Yeah, and going back to the news stuff, like there's a lot of discussion always about the value of like late breaking news because there's less analysis around it. And in this week, everything will kind of be more heavily weighted towards late breaking news because there'll be just less coverage around it and fewer people will like consume it and stuff like that. So I think those are all advantages for us as people who do pay attention to stuff like that. Obviously, like spend time with your family, ignore the news for a while, please. Sunday morning, though, circle back around and then get back up to speed on what happened while you were out. You should have time Sunday morning to do all that and get the info you need. Okay, injury section for this week will be light because, again, we don't have injury reports from Wednesday yet. But let's go through the ones we know about and are monitoring as of right now. The big one is Aaron Jones. Not sure if he'll play yet this week. It seems like it's most likely that he sits. AJ Dillon, $6,900. Brandon, how would you handle Jones or Dillon if Jones misses a second straight game?
Yeah, I think he'd be one of the best plays of the week again from a process standpoint. He played 74% of the snaps last week, 23 adjusted opportunities, which for us is carries plus double your targets. Because the reason we do that is an average running back carries worth twice as many FanDuel points on average. A target is worth twice as many points as a carry on average. He had 6 targets last week. That's a really good workload. And this is just one of the better offenses on it's a small main slate. It's about as small as we ever get for a main slate. So he really stands out to me as one of the best running back plays. And I mean, while we're talking about injuries and how things affect us, this is probably a good example too of like, let's say, hey, we're going into the weekend. I think you and I both love AJ Dillon. We find out Aaron Jones plays. That takes AJ Dillon off the board, but that still doesn't affect Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, that kind of stuff that you don't have to, throw everything out and start from scratch if you're really digging into these situations.
Although if the place kicker for the Colts misses, then it blows up everything for the entire Colts-Bucks matchup in my mind, at least. Yeah. So, that's how it works. The trickle-down effect, the butterfly effect of DFS. So,
yes,
still that. Eli Mitchell, day-to-day with his finger injury. We'll talk about this game later on, but if you want to talk about Jeff Wilson here specifically, let's assume Mitchell sits again. What would you do with Wilson at $5,800?
So the role wasn't quite what I had hoped for. I mean, the results are one thing, but the role, not really what I was expecting. 58% snap rate, 2 targets for him, 19 carries. Like, it's really hard to look at 19 carries and 2 targets, and especially at a sub 6,000 salary, and nitpick it. And that's the thing that stands out to me is like the salary's still low, the workload's still good, and the results weren't there. But according to my model, he should have had about 15 expected FanDuel points. Had an end zone target that could have cashed in. The next play, he came up short on a rush for not a touchdown, but a first down, if memory serves. So it really was like a good enough role for the salary within a viable offense. So I definitely would say we can go back there. It's just a matter of then how you value him versus, there's an opportunity cost if you're playing Jeff Wilson that you're not getting a third stud running back.
Yeah, I think his role was underwhelming is what I would say. I think, which sounds like kind of where you were as well. But like there was still enough there if we assume that both Mitchell and JaMychal Hasty sit. If JaMychal Hasty plays, that's where I start to get a little bit sketched out in terms of how I view Wilson. Like I think I could still consider him because the matchup's a lot better in terms of rushing this week than it was last week. So I think that is a positive here. But like I still think that he's going to be, I'll be lower on him this week than I was last week, despite the fact that it's a better matchup and a really good game, just because, there were some issues with his role for sure.
Yeah, you don't really love to see fades to an offensive tackle at the goal line instead of
I also
carries.
don't love to see them using a receiver as a running back as opposed to the actual running back.
Yeah. So I think that this will come down to if you really want to talk yourself into like a Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor start, or if you are really, really valuing, a Cooper Kupp or Devontae Adams, and you think that they're better plays than maybe their running back counterparts, which is its own conversation. Like, I don't think he's off the radar if we get both of those other running backs out. But like you said, if there's Hasty there, there's probably not a big enough path to upside. Although, we've seen Jeff Wilson just put up like 7 touchdowns in a game before.
Right. And I think that's why I would still use him. Like if we get with no Mitchell and no Hasty, I would still definitely go there. It would just be not the 80% or whatever I wound up with last
Yeah.
week. Wouldn't be there, but he would still be a good play at that point. Jordan Howard likely to miss this week due to a knee issue, which trims it to potentially a 2-man backfield for Philadelphia. Plus Miles Sanders' role could expand as he is another week removed from his injury. Does that do enough for you to get on Sanders here at $6,100?
So you're talking about the pace in this game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's appealing.
Mm-hmm.
This one again comes down to there's an opportunity cost of if you play Miles Sanders, you are not, and let's say we get AJ Dillon. I don't know if Miles Sanders plus AJ Dillon is really required to get the lineups I want, unless I'm saying I'm playing Tom Brady. I want Cooper Kupp and one of his receivers. So I think it just comes down to how heavily you have the wide receivers above the running backs at the top.
Yeah.
Because that really dictates the need to talk yourself into Miles Sanders' role getting better.
Yeah, I think I'm higher on him now than I was Monday. We talked about Howard potentially being out then as well.
Yeah.
I am growing more receptive to it because they've been really good as a rushing team, which means it's kind of like a 49ers type situation where you expect the efficiency of the groundwork to be pretty good. So I would say at $6,100, that actually is pretty nice. That's a good salary relative to other guys in that range. And, in his role last week, 94 yards for him across those 18 adjusted opportunities. That's not too bad.
With a downfield target?
With a downfield target. I think that they like him. I think from they probably should more so than Boston Scott. They had a chance to give Boston Scott more of a big role and they decided to give Jordan Howard work. So if you give me a 60% snap share, which I think is realistic, 60% snap share, very heavy rush team, very efficient rush team against a pretty bad rush defense, I think that's enough for me to get there. I do want to kind of read the room a bit as we get closer to it, but I think for right now, I am currently in on Sanders, not aggressively, not for cash games, but I would like to get there. I just want to proceed with a little bit of caution as a result of the fact that I'd still expect Scott to get work.
Yeah, so usually I'm at least building some preliminary lineups before the Thursday show. I didn't have quite as much time this week. In building things out, if I really want to play Tom Brady plus a Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, plug in CMC, give me a Dalvin Cook kind of back and a viable tight end. I think we will really have to be open to the idea of, you're smirking at me, but
you just listed 5 out of the 6 players in the lineup that I made last night, I think.
So if you're going to go that route with Brady, whose salary's not that high on a typical main slate, but is one of the higher salaries of this main slate, you want to stack him with, and your options are the 2 receivers.
Yeah.
I think I got to be a little bit more open to the idea of my third running back being down here. And at this rate, I would put Miles Sanders above Jeff Wilson.
Sanders versus Dillon? No, I agree.
Versus Dillon, I think I'd still go Dillon.
I agree.
Yeah, looking more at Miles Sanders, like you said, warming up to him. Even just now, I was I don't quite think I'll be there. But if you take Jordan Howard out, that should open up more red zone rushing work. I had Sanders with an expected FanDuel point output of about 12 last week, so could have been even better.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that game's going to be pretty decent. So I think Miles Sanders actually is on the radar.
Yeah. I think he's above Wilson. I agree with you there. I think he's below Dillon by a bit, so I agree with you there as well. And I will say, if you want to build a Brady lineup with McCaffrey, you probably need a value back in there. And I have it with Dalvin. I made one with Dalvin, but I had to go down for the third back. So, then it's, do I prefer Dalvin versus AJ Dillon? So it does get a little bit sketchy, but I think that, it's worth that discussion, I would say. And if I have to use Sanders to get upside elsewhere, I'm pretty okay with that personally. I think he has 20 within his range of outcomes.
Yeah, there's like, and we're not going to give out full lineups, anything like that.
No.
If you start like Brady, McCaffrey, Dalvin, Evans, and you want A.J. Dillon in there, you can make it work,
You're
but
probably skipping Michael Pittman at that point.
you're skipping any bring back potential with
Yeah.
Brady, and you're kind of locked into the few low end, like low salary value receivers. So you're going to have, I think this could actually be a pretty, I won't even say fully duplicated lineup, but like
Pretty
very chalky.
Yeah, I agree. The Jets have a lot of stuff going on. Michael Carter will miss this week due to an ankle injury, but Zach Wilson is back. He's going to start this week with Joe Flacco and Mike White both being out due to COVID. So we have Zach Wilson. We've got Tevin Coleman at $5,600, Ty Johnson at $52. Are you tempted by either of those guys in a plus matchup versus the Texans with Wilson at quarterback?
Is it a plus matchup? The Texans taking care of business.
Against the Titans. Is the Titans offense? I'll stop. I was going to ask if the Titans offense is better than the Jets, but it was going to be a joke, and I'm not sure if it would come across that way given my track record with Ryan Tannehill. So,
well, I was like, okay, I'm looking at defenses here, like for the end of the show, and I was like, oh, I'll just pick Houston because they're not a good defense, but they're 4,900.
What?
They're 4,900. I mean,
how are the Bengals 33 and the Texans 49?
They got 16 and 15 FanDuel points the past two games. They've allowed 13 and 17 points the past two against Miami and Tennessee on the road, mind you. But yeah, I was more inclined to play the Texans defense than take this value. I think that this is a fine spot for like season long. If you really need a plug and play running back, I would go Ty Johnson over Coleman. But we talked about this on the recap show. Their workloads are pretty similar, so you have to get past you have to project what you think will happen. And that's pretty risky when it comes to daily fantasy, especially with a team that has virtually ran a committee until Michael Carter started to separate. All indications are that it'll be about a 50-50 share, and you don't really want that in offense this week.
So you have to project what you think will happen, and they have to hit. That's two things there, and that's tough. How does Zach Wilson starting impact Elijah Moore and Corey Davis for you?
It's kind of a wash for me.
Yeah, I think it's a lateral move. I think people view it as a downgrade, but I think it's a lateral move. Like, are we really going to deem anyone a downgrade from Joe Flacco? I feel like it's a pretty lateral move, which means that I'm okay with Moore. I think that Corey Davis is a really, really good tournament pivot under the assumption Moore will be popular, because we've seen Davis have good chemistry with Wilson this year, and Corey Davis is still getting targets. So I think I love Elijah Moore and want him to succeed, but I do think that it's a fun time to pivot to Corey Davis at $6,100. Stack him with Brandon Cooks as like a mini stack. Like if I've got a situation where I'm going Brady with Gronk and I've got, some wide receiver slots open, that's a situation where I'd be okay going this weird, potentially suboptimal route.
And honestly, like with quarterback being what it is, I don't think Tyrod Taylor is the worst play at 74. If you want to stack that game up, that'd be an overall value stack with Taylor, Cooks, and either Jets receiver. You could do a lot from there with the better game environments and like the higher salaried studs. You don't seem that into it, but it's more of it's definitely not like a priority thing. But
I see what you're saying. I just I think Tyrod is kind of like a light version of the issues we talked about with Cam Newton and Jalen Hurts, where they don't throw enough to be a dual threat. And I think that's so. I don't know. It's not the worst idea, and I get why you're saying it. I just don't think I'll get there.
I think within the context of quarterback, we have to ask, what are the odds someone gets to like 30 here? Hurts hasn't shown that because he's not throwing.
He did get to it last week,
but
3 rushing touchdowns.
Yes. I'm not projecting 18
you're right.
points from I guess 18.3 for at least one rushing yard on all those. But Brady could do it. Cam doesn't really have the passing. Rodgers, maybe, depending on how you view that overall matchup.
Stafford could.
Herbert, you're going to talk about upside in that game. Like Kirk Cousins, he's got a very, very narrow path to do it. So like if we take and we talked about this on the Thanksgiving preview, like what you say, hey, what are the odds Josh Allen, Dak Prescott don't really have huge games? Then these lower salary quarterbacks are more viable because they can match, the floors of the higher salary quarterbacks. So there's usually you got to talk yourself into 5 or 6 quarterbacks like falling below 25. It's not that many this week.
Like Brady, basically.
and of course, this will be the week where Herbert goes for 5 touchdowns himself.
It's
but
probably not.
Probably not.
Speaking of upside, let's talk Titans Patriots. AJ Brown banged up. Status is unknown for this week. They're facing the Patriots here. Any interest in them at all?
No, they got rid of Adrian Peterson, so that makes the backfield a little bit tighter, but I don't think there's enough there anyway.
I think it'll just be a 3-man backfield with 3 different guys, with Deontay Foreman, Dontrell Hilliard, and I'd guess this means Jeremy McNichols is expected to get cleared this week.
Potentially. I don't think there's enough upside from the receivers. I will say AJ Brown, where he is projected, has a really high per dollar projection. So if he's cleared, I think he'll be really chalky. And, at least anecdotally, and maybe I finally have to dig into this, like who else would Bill Belichick scheme to slow down than AJ Brown? Like he's probably not going to get loose.
Nick Westbrook-Akine.
So I'm out on this entire offense, and I don't really feel guilty about that.
This game sucks. Gonna avoid it. Jamal Agnew was officially placed on IR by the Jags this week. It's fun story that he did this. I'm kind of bummed, honestly, that he's on IR.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about Marvin Jones on Monday. Is the Agnew injury enough for you to go at Jones at $5,900?
It's enough for me to consider him, especially because we need value at receiver. He's not going to be my favorite value receiver, but I would put him. I think value for us at receiver is at least 6,000 and below, if not 5,900 and below.
Yeah.
There might be a list of 4, 5. You say 4. So he's on that list, right?
Yeah. So to me, Marv, I forgot the other. Kadarius Toney, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Van Jefferson. Those are the 4 I have my eyes on.
Yeah. So he's on that list. Mm-hmm. He would be 4th for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that might answer the question, but I'm probably going to be down there plenty.
Agreed.
Especially because what I do is I build lineups, I duplicate them, and then I make just a few tweaks so that my core stays really tight. Those guys will be the ones I'm rotating through a lot.
Yeah, because they all have very clear paths to failure. So I agree. And I think that all 4 of those are honestly better than the 5,000 receivers we've had for a while. So that does increase my enthusiasm / optimism I can get to McCaffrey, JT, Dalvin, et cetera, et cetera.
Any thoughts on James Robinson?
No, he's oversalaried.
Okay. Just asking because he's someone we haven't talked about in quite some time.
Yeah, his role's been bad since he came back, honestly. So am I wrong to write him off? Do you disagree? Or
it's mostly the matchup that I think we don't want to just cast everything aside. But 64% snap rate last week. Carlos Hyde's still kind of there.
Yeah.
Wait, Carlos Hyde played 30% of the snaps and got 1 target and no carries. Is that wrong?
Let me look. I can pull it up here. Okay. Carlos Hyde.
That's right.
No carries, 1 target on a 30% snap rate.
That's 13 snaps. So it's not.
Well, he did
8 routes on 13 snaps.
It was a decrease from the previous week, though, where he had 2 carries and 2 targets on a 29% snap rate. Is there Rich Rebar coined the doing cardio thing for Chris Hogan, where he'd run routes would never get targeted? Is there a Carlos Hyde equivalent for a running back?
I don't think running backs don't work that way.
They do now.
I thought that was a mistake with my spreadsheet, but
Carlos Hyde, the Chris Hogan of running backs. Final injury here. Eric Ebron probably going to miss this week for the Steelers, which should put Pat Freiermuth back into a full-time role. I know we talked about this Monday, and I was like, hey, I'm downgrading Freiermuth. I've given up on that now with Eric Ebron being out. What's your outlook for him at $5,300?
I like him. I just like him as a prospect, and I did all off season, and it's been panning out, which is one of the more surprising things, just because he's a rookie tight end.
I thought you were saying surprisingly you were right. I was like, I have more confidence.
Well, I mean, it's the way
I
for
believe
Enzo
in
Mims.
you, even if you don't believe in you.
Well, thank you. This comes down to how you view his true ceiling compared to the upper salaried tight ends, which tight end's pretty decent this week at the top with Kittle, Kyle Pitts in a good matchup. Rob Gronkowski's back. Mike Gesicki can get a lot of work. Very low total. Noah Fant always has some potential. So it's like, do you want to pass those guys up and play value at receiver, or do you want to play Freiermuth and like a Michael Pittman? So I guess an equivalent might be like a Van Jefferson, George Kittle versus Michael Pittman, Pat Freiermuth. Might be the same salaries there.
I think I'm in a situation where I'll need both. Honestly.
I think both is the answer. Yeah. So Freiermuth's in that conversation as a result. But tight end, I think, is actually kind of decent.
It is. I agree. I think that of the lower salary tight ends, I've got Freiermuth above redacted, above the he who shall not be named, aka Tyler Higbee.
Oh! I thought this was a Dan Arnold bit.
Oh no, I don't view him as being a real player. He's T. Higgins. He's fake. So like, he's not even like in the consideration for me. Whereas Tyler Higbee is still.
Well,
it's Freiermuth above Higbee for me. And then other guy who you mentioned, who I'm not going to talk about, is just, I don't know.
Yeah, well, he's a player love for me. I have Freiermuth above him. I know we've been okay taking the same guys, but we had a lot of overlap, so I figured I'd at least differentiate a little bit.
You have time to change it. Don't worry.
I think people will go away from Dan Arnold in a really good matchup because he had no targets, but he ran a lot of routes last week.
He was the Carlos Hyde of tight ends last week. Let's go to Bookmaker Info for this week. The one standout total on the slate is for the Bucks and the Colts. That one is at 51.5 with the Bucks 3-point favorites. We don't know yet the status of Vita Vea or Antonio Brown. Definitely have viable guys on each side. I'd expect Vita Vea to play. I would expect Antonio Brown to sit. So what's your view of this game from a stacking perspective?
You and I talked before the show that there's a chance we play only Tom Brady this week.
Yeah, so like I had this whole thing on Monday about like, hey, for single entry, don't use the same lineup for each one, just kind of as like a basic strategy thing. I'm not going to the same lineup, but I'm probably going to the same quarterback, and it might just be Tom Brady across the board.
Yeah, the path for Tom Brady to bust here seems extremely low.
Yeah.
Or like, I guess, extremely narrow for him to bust. So but the path for him to flourish is wide open. We need to make like a meme of like the two paths diverging in the wood.
One of them just like tiny.
One's real tiny and like,
and one of them's a giant passing lane in the Colts defense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that. But yeah, I mean, and that's not even to be just jokey. I think Brady has by far the best case to be made for a quarterback this week. We know who we want to stack him with. It's Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think we'll have a little bit of a debate there, but I would say we both like Mike Evans more. That much I can say with confidence. I think Godwin, despite not having as good a role as Mike Evans, is still very viable. We can bring it back with Michael Pittman. That's about it, but I think that's like the go-to stack. Of course, we can bring it back with Jonathan Taylor, but I'm talking pass catchers.
Yeah.
So that's going to be, I would almost guarantee, in a bobble hat against you.
Absolutely. I think so too. With regards to the stacking guys, I actually do think so. I've been off of stacking tight ends or quarterbacks with just their tight ends. If I want to get the tight end in there, I'll typically lop in receiver too. I think I could consider going with Brady and just Gronk as a pass catcher because Gronk actually has like yardage upside, which is wild, but he does. I think my preference would be if I'm going to have Gronk, I want Evans or Godwin in there too. But I think I'm okay considering Brady with just Gronk as far as like stacking for this game. We're adding Gronk, $6,500, not a low salary, but I think his role is pretty good.
Yeah, so I think I need to bump him up from where I was. I really do love George Kittle and Kyle Pitts. I think Pitts might be a little bit forgotten. It's a really
Yeah.
good matchup for him.
He's facing a non-elite defensive coordinator for the first time in a bit. That's good.
So Gronk really gets bumped up and put in that tier solely because I love his quarterback so much this week. Process-wise, outside of that, I still would have him at least third among those three tight ends, but I'll probably say it's going to be a spot where I have more Rob Gronkowski than my process says I should, just because I don't really think I'll have access to a lot of other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Gronk in his full games is 8, 5, 8, and 8 targets. That's pretty good. He's had 70 plus yards twice in those 4 games. He's had a really good role. And like he looked pretty good on Monday too. So also I kind of think that they get upgraded with him out there, which probably sounds stupid, but like, there aren't a ton of guys who like I actively bump up when they're healthy. And I think Gronk kind of is playing like that kind of guy. So that also with Brady, I think that he works. If I had to rank them in terms of like stacking, like if we're talking just with Brady, I would go Evans, Godwin, Gronk. If we're talking as standalone plays, if we ignore Brady, then it becomes Evans, Gronk, Godwin. Just because Godwin's target shares in the games with Gronk have been, it's a small sample, but like they've been a little tiny baby bit underwhelming. Yardage upside hasn't been quite as big. So I think I'd still like Godwin, but I put him third in terms of standalone play behind those two.
Yeah, that's kind of, it's just really nitpicky to have to rank them that way, but they're all three are in play, and that's why I think that gives extra viability to Tom Brady for this slate with, and I always hate when there are too many stacking options, but it's three and it's three really good ones.
And they're three with massive upside.
And they're three with massive upside within their positions. How would you change things if Antonio Brown were to play? Because we don't know.
Yeah. I'd upgrade Brady.
Yeah. Like it's probably not worth considering, but like I guess while we're here at least.
No, yeah, I think I would still like be fine with all those guys. I would just make sure to get some Brown lineups in there too, basically. Because like we saw earlier this year that they can go off with Brown being active. So it's not ideal, but I'd still be fine with it. It would lower me on them as standalone plays. That probably answers your question better.
Yeah.
But, I just get some Brown lineups in there with my Brady stacks. Okay. We mentioned Michael Pittman. I think he is the preferred bring back here. I do think that Jonathan Taylor still works for DFS because Frank Reich's not stupid. He understands that this is a tough rushing matchup and may get Taylor more involved as a pass catcher as a result. I mean, he's had a pretty good pass catching role, honestly, recently. In the 6 games of the snaps being up, 3.7 targets per game, but they're kind of like fun targets. So I think that works. I prefer Christian McCaffrey over JT, and I prefer Pittman as a bring back, but I still want to get some JT in there. Where are you at on Taylor and Pittman as bring back options here?
I love Pittman as a standalone play, especially that salary where we never really have a lot of options in that salary tier at receiver. He stands out to me from just a one-off. Even if I'm not playing Tom Brady and I don't actually have any Buccaneers, I like his role enough to want to play him. So ingest that into a stack, and it's just a very obvious one. My biggest fear is that I will be too heavy on Michael Pittman because like I'm cool if I go straight up lock button on Tom Brady.
Yeah.
But if every one of those lineups
is,
or like a lot of those lineups are just tied to Michael Pittman because he's the only pass catcher who makes sense to bring it back with, and Pittman puts up like 8 points, that's rough.
Yeah.
So I got to watch that, and that ups the viability of just stacking with Jonathan Taylor because there's a path to this game just being, we say path a lot, I know, but that's kind of how we think.
Yeah.
There's a path to Jonathan Taylor running the ball efficiently enough, getting something on the ground, being involved as a pass catcher, and then just running in the touchdowns with his insane red zone workload.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tom Brady just slinging it. And that's how that game goes.
Yeah.
So I don't typically stack running backs against my quarterbacks, but I think in this case it works. So that's the only way I can kind of get away from Pittman is if I do stack Jonathan Taylor there.
I do that a lot, honestly. But I would say to me right now, it's 70-30 in favor of Pittman over Taylor. If I had like
Yeah,
10 Brady lineups, I wouldn't have
I'd say
said
that too.
7-3. Although if I had 10 Brady lineups, I'd probably do 6 Pittman, 3 Taylor, 1 blank, like one with no bring back
Yeah, but yeah,
to account
so
for what
that
you were saying.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. A matchup of NFC heavyweights this week is in Green Bay. High total coming down a bit. Tight spread actually went back up to 48. So totals of 48 for Packers hosting the Rams. It is a 1-point spread in Green Bay's favor. Rams are coming off a bye, but now they're playing on the road, outdoors. I would mention that right now there is a wind projection of 15 miles per hour, 35-degree temperatures. I'm just saying that. I don't think it's like worth freaking out over right now. Noting that though, what's your level of confidence in the Rams offense specifically this week? And then thoughts on this game.
Confidence, not really a word I'd say I have with them at this point, but interest is still there. Although the interest has gone from Daryl Henderson and obviously Robert Woods more toward Van Jefferson at a great salary of 5,400. Of course, I love Cooper Kupp, but that salary of 9,500 is really hard to get to with the stud running backs we have. And this goes back to like, hey, if you think Cooper Kupp's a better play than Christian McCaffrey in a game with a low total, Jonathan Taylor in a really tough matchup, you can sell yourself on a Miles Sanders a lot more easily. I don't quite know if I'm there with Cooper Kupp, but if you look at his game logs, there's upside that hasn't ever been there with Cooper Kupp. He's got 17.7 and 15 FanDuel points the past 2 games without a touchdown.
That's stupid.
13 targets in each of those. Like, I usually balk at receivers up past 9,000 on FanDuel, but like the way that he's doing it is kind of sustainable because it's so volume driven.
Yeah. And it's good volume. Like he's getting the ball in ways that like is conducive to both floor and upside. So I've not typically been the biggest Cooper Kupp guy. I'm very okay changing my tune. I would say like look at his shares, like they're Devontae Adams shares. And if Devontae Adams were 95, we wouldn't really blink twice. Like, okay, that's fair. So I think to me, it's a very justifiable number. If we get Jeff Wilson and Miles Sanders without their backfield, or if we get Jeff Wilson and AJ Dillon without their backfield mates, you can very easily fill out a lineup with a Brady stack and Cooper Kupp as a one-off. And so I think that I like that a lot. I would say if I'm game stacking this game, Cooper Kupp is the guy I want to focus on most there, because if you assume it goes off, I'm not assuming it's because of Van Jefferson. I'm assuming it's because of Cooper Kupp doing stupid stuff. So that's one thing I would know as well.
Yeah, and because the salaries are so prohibitive, a Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams stack is probably like both of those guys should have popularity, but the combination of the two probably not that common just because it's so hard to do. Of course, you'll really be strapped for your salary at running back, but again, if we get news or you're willing to take a chance on Miles Sanders or you sell yourself on the Jets backfield, which I can't quite do myself, like that's such an obvious like high upside pivot to me.
Yeah. I like that combination a lot personally, and you can make it work pretty easily. So honestly, like if we can get these value backs, I think you have 2 different builds this week where you blow it all on running backs or blow it all at receivers. I want a kind of stars and scrubsy type build for this week. I think that's where I want to go. And it does depend on where the running backs break this week.
For sure.
What's your level of confidence in this game? Because to me, I am a lot less confident this game shoots out than the Bucks Colts game. It's outdoors, that's part of it, but also like, I don't know. The Packers have the ability to make games stupid a lot. I know they had a huge fun game last week, but like they can make things dumb very fast. Does that worry you?
It does. This game, I have some like rudimentary game scores that I do. I factor in over under implied team totals, pace and pass rate. This one's 5th on the main slate. It's really Tampa Bay and Indianapolis like way out in front.
Yeah.
And this one's just kind of in the second tier. It doesn't really differentiate, doesn't really separate from anything else. Despite that, though, I think it'll carry some popularity because we got bigger names in it. with the two superstar receivers with Van Jefferson, who will probably be one of the more popular plays just due to the salary savings he offers us. But honestly, it doesn't do a whole lot to separate for me. A big reason for that is the pace. And like you said, that's primarily from the Packers. They, like, if you watch them, they are cool just like snapping the ball with 2 seconds on the play clock, and that just grinds things down. Of course, it's an explosive enough offense on both sides where we could still see points, but I think I'll probably just be lower on this game in general. And if I do get there, I think it'll just be whenever I really try to take some value at running back and double stack those receivers.
The pace concerns are part of why I feel like I'm just going to wind up with a lot of Brady, is because in theory, Rodgers and Stafford could both be solid. But like, that's the concern that I have there. Some potential weather concerns. Again, it's Wednesday, who cares? In terms of offensive efficiency, I have no concerns, because right now, if I look at my numbers for projected offensive efficiency, Green Bay ranks 5th on the slate. The Rams rank 4th. Actually, sorry, that's 3rd and 4th on the main slate, because Dallas is up there too. So 3rd and 4th on the main slate behind Tampa Bay and Minnesota. This is the game with the highest projected offensive efficiency between both sides. It's up there because Indianapolis doesn't grade out as well in my stuff. So that's why it's up there. The pace concerns do matter, though. So I would say I think Rodgers and Stafford are both considerations. This is a 2-quarterback game stack. I just don't know how high I can get on either due to the concerns around. They're both considerations to me, is the way I'd phrase it.
Yeah, but it's different. It's so like it's almost like they're each a half quarterback, so it's like a 1 quarterback game in total. Because this is not what we would typically call a 2-quarterback game, which there aren't any, because there's only really 1 quarterback that we want anyway on the whole slate. So
quick pause on that. Should we talk about Carson Wentz or no?
We can talk about him.
Would you consider him?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Would you?
I don't want to. But like, I feel like I should ask you for takes on him. Yeah, no, I'm okay. Not going there. I should also ask you for takes on Daryl Henderson, because I don't trust myself there. I do trust myself, but I know where I sit on this. Are you going to use Daryl Henderson this week?
I don't think so. I really have problems with the way that he accrues fantasy points. It's a big kind of question mark for me. He did play 74% of the snaps before their bye. Like, I'm not writing him off saying it's a bad situation, but if he doesn't score multiple touchdowns, he doesn't really have a whole lot to give to us. So I'm probably not going to get there, even though this game has the potential to be the best game of the week. I think that potential is lower than most people will think. And I think that will also make Henderson a little bit more popular than I think he deserves to be.
Yeah. So among all backs in their most relevant samples with salaries of $6,900 or higher,
Nice.
He ranks last in 83 with 83 yards per game and a 27% red zone share. Even in a good game, those are the 2 routes to upside, and he's not the best in either. So if he burns me, it burns me. I've been okay being lower on him so far this year, and we'll see. That could change, and it could hurt me, but it hasn't yet. So I don't know. Whatever.
I'm gonna add something to a pivot table. So I'll get back. I might circle back here depending on.
Are you making like a hurt me metric?
Basically.
Okay, call it that, please. Other 48.5 point total on the board. Actually, I think this one's gone down. Anyway, it's San Francisco for the 49ers and the Vikings. 49ers favored by 3. Eli Mitchell, the one guy we're waiting on here in terms of injury news, but everything else is pretty steady for this game. So, Brandon, we talked about the 49ers backfield. What's your view of the rest of this game?
Yeah, deep in a pivot table here. We're talking 49ers.
49ers versus Vikings.
Yeah, actually, I did know this matchup. I've been a little, because of the Thanksgiving prep. There's been a few matchups that I've not actually remembered off the top of my head who's playing who.
Progress. Proud of you.
I have this game ranked a little bit higher than the game we just talked about. I think that there are definitely plays that we can consider. I like Brandon Ayuk. I liked him last week. Led the team in targets with 7. His role has gotten a lot better recently, and if Deebo Samuel is relegated more to the backfield, that just makes it an easier situation for Ayuk to generate targets. And whatever, I don't know what would have happened where he was not playing early on, but like it's not really a production thing because like he's been pretty good once he's been getting targeted. So you say 85 yards or 2 touchdowns for receivers.
Yeah, I think he's had 85 yards twice in the past 3 games, right?
Yeah, he had 85 and a touchdown, and then a down game against the Rams, but then 89 and a touchdown the week before. So that's basically like that's enough at 6,300, where he's definitely close to the list of like. And I'll say this: if I cannot get back up to Michael Pittman, and I got to settle for Brandon Ayuk, I'm cool with that this week.
Yeah.
We talked Jeff Wilson already. I think our thoughts are clear there. I'm probably not going to end up with any Deebo, which is a little bit scary. But if I'm allocating high salary to a receiver, I'd probably just go with Justin Jefferson in this game, because yes, there's guaranteed touches if Deebo's getting carries, but if that comes at the expense of targets, that's a big concern for me. Could have just been game script related last week against the Jags, but I would probably put Jefferson above Deebo, and I'd also probably put Jamar Chase above Deebo this week.
So I think that if I'm stacking the game there, I prefer Deebo because he has a lot of upside. And if the game blows up, it's probably because he's doing some fun stuff.
True.
So I think that's the one thing that keeps me from crossing him off. But I think that he is one of the players where I need to care the most about roster rates and popularity, because if he's popular, I want no piece of it because he's oversalaried. If he goes overlooked, I want to be there because he has disgusting upside. So I do want to get the read on the way things are going this week. And if people are like, Deebo's oversalaried, he's a running back now, I would like to get there, because if you look at his week last week, ran a route on 22 of 24 dropbacks. Only 2 of those routes came from the backfield. So when he was in the backfield, it was mostly for running plays. So that doesn't really change like his route tree. He also had the lone deep target last week. I don't think his role actually changed that much in terms of the passing game. They just didn't throw the ball to him as much because they had, 20 dropbacks because that's what they want to do. So if I'm game stacking, and I prefer Deebo, standalone play, it's Ayuk by a country mile, like by a wide margin, because the salary is great. The role is very good. Although I prefer Kittle over Ayuk for a standalone play. What about you for that?
Kittle over Ayuk for a standalone play, yes. For like a cash game, I'm much more likely to have Ayuk than Deebo straight up. I probably should revise my stance with Deebo if I'm stacking this game. I get what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Where I would really, if that game blows up, it's because Deebo's doing something. But this also is not really a game that I feel like I'm targeting too much.
Okay.
Where does this game rank for you on the full slate?
Second. It's second because it might be a 0 quarterback second. I think Kirk Cousins is a consideration for me. I'd rather not, but I might have to because quarterback is so bad. But I think because I know where the ball is going, it is a projected high efficiency game. That's kind of tough for me to turn down. And I know how I want to stack this game. I want to go Dalvin Cook on the Vikings side again, and Justin Jefferson. Cook, preference for me because he's a running back, just kind of the way it goes. His role is absurd relative to his tier. He should be, if you flipped his and Najee's salary, I wouldn't blink at it. He's 81, Najee's 88. I think Dalvin should be 88, honestly. So I think Dalvin Cook is a massive, massive core play for me. It's very easy to run it back with Kittle or Ayuk, or if it's a full game stack, run it back with Deebo. So that's why it's there. And Justin Jefferson, I'm not going to talk you out of him just because he blew up. He blew up because he gets good usage and he's a very good football player facing a bad secondary this week. So no objections there, but I think that's where I'm at. That's why I like it, is I know how to stack it.
Yeah, that's true. I know we're going to talk Denver and I almost call them the Clippers because I got NBA brain
I
going
know.
on.
I don't even I don't care about the NBA, and it trips me up to see LAC every time.
Yeah, it was the LAC specifically that got
Yeah.
me. That game does rate out higher than this one, but there are plenty of concerns. This game still feels like it could be gross because the pass rate's so low.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think maybe that's what's bogging me down
That's
is I
fair.
think the odds of this one erupting are a little bit lower just because these teams would want ideally to keep it on the ground and keep the clock moving.
That's very fair. I can see that. Okay, we're going to go into the trends discussion here in just 1 second. But first, FanDuel and Simple Mobile have partnered to add an extra layer of excitement to one of the biggest free-to-play contests on the market. Introducing the FanDuel free-to-play Gridiron Pick'em contest presented by Simple Mobile, a completely free-to-play contest that gives you a chance to win big on Sundays. Here's how it works. Simply answer 10 Pick'em questions for this week's slate of NFL games and compete for a chance to win your share of $10,000 in cash prizes. If you're one of the highest scoring users on the day, you will be eligible to win some cold hard cash. Kickoff will be here before you know it. So head to fanduel.com/free/contest/gridiron pick'em and make your picks today. And skip the contracts with high-speed data, talk, and text on a powerful nationwide network. I've screwed that up every time. Nationwide network with Simple Mobile. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's dive into our trends here for week number 12. Your first one is in one of the other games. So we have to talk about the other games too and try to decide which of these stink less. You're talking about Steelers versus Bengals, specifically the Steelers with no Juju. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, so we got 20 teams on the main slate, and we went over, virtually 6 of the best ones, if not the 6 best ones already in the bookmaker section. So the pickings left over were not ideal for the most part, but this Steelers team is one that I've mostly overlooked all season, aside from Najee Harris, and I at least figured this was a good opportunity to dig in and see what exists and what could be one of the more appealing games of the week, although it is a divisional matchup against the Bengals. You know, this is just like I said, it's been an afterthought offense for me, and it's not really burned me very often because there's not a not an abundance of big fantasy outputs within this offense. I actually wanted to make sure I wasn't just making that up, so I looked things up. And their non-quarterbacks have maxed out at 21.7 FanDuel points this year. That's the 4th lowest output by a single team's top non-quarterback scorer. But this is like a somewhat viable offense. So I wanted to make sure that I'm not just going to cross them off in what could be a good situation. And just because the ceilings haven't quite been there doesn't mean that they won't be. That's not how ceilings work. If you've scored 25 points once, it doesn't really mean that your ceiling every week is 25 points. It doesn't quite work that way. And according to Next Gen Stats, Ben Roethlisberger's 2021 splits have actually been slightly worse with Juju Smith-Schuster on the field than without him. I mean, I love Juju, but he's really not the needle moving talent, or at least doesn't have a needle moving role.
He's not used that way.
Yeah. So I'm not downgrading this offense, and that's something that you and I talk about a lot. And in this split without Juju, Ben Roethlisberger has been perfectly league average with 0.12 passing net expected points per drop back. The NFL average is a 0.11, and if you adjust all those games against the opponent expectation, he's been a little bit above expectation by 0.02 points per play. It's fine. It's viable, and that's on this slate could be enough if we like this game overall. Now that's led to only 243 yards per game, 1.8 touchdowns, not a ton of yardage in this offense, and that really sucks because Deontay Johnson is getting a lot of work. And again, in these games without Juju Smith-Schuster, but with Ben Roethlisberger, Deontay Johnson has a 31% target share and a 43% air yard share. He's averaged 81.5 yards per game on those, 108 air yards per game in that sample as well. He's returned 13.9 FanDuel points despite an expectation of 17.1. That is awesome usage. 2.3 downfield targets, 2 red zone targets in that sample. Salary is 7,100. Issue is I don't know if I can really put him above other receivers in that tier, but if it's enough to like this game, then I'm kind of interested. Chase Claypool has an 18% target share in these 4 relevant games. Still getting some downfield work, still involved in the red zone. We already talked Pat Freiermuth. I think we both will say that we like him at 5,300. And then we get to Najee Harris at 8,800 with a lot of elite running backs to go through. And again, the ceiling has been the issue for Najee, and a lot of the reason that we like to pay up for Christian McCaffrey, for Jonathan Taylor, is because they can bust open a slate. It's been different with Harris. It's been like a high floor output. He has a per game average of 30.5 adjusted opportunities in this sample, still giving us 17.7 FanDuel points with an expectation of 18.4. Has been underperforming as a rusher. The success rate's low. The expected yards per carry outperform his actual yards per carry, but he's definitely not off the radar by any means. The reason I wanted to look into this offense was to see if there's enough to be viable. I think Ben Roethlisberger is doing enough to keep them viable. I would not normally have considered Deontay Johnson, but I think he's probably a pretty good like head-to-head play. I think Chase Claypool is at least interesting if you like this game to turn into a shootout, which it could, but I don't think Najee Harris has enough for me to want to go to him over even like an Austin Eckler or especially a Dalvin Cook this week. So probably not there with Najee outside of game stacks, but any thoughts for you on the Steelers offense, which is just honestly one that we kind of gloss over all the time?
Yeah, I think the typical issue with Deontay is that it's the Terry McLaurin effect where like I like his workload, I just don't like the game. And like this game's fine. So I don't mind him at 71 and I prefer him over Claypool relative to salary.
This is a second time around divisional matchup, which is
Yeah.
usually
Yeah.
iffy.
I would say that I prefer Freiermuth over both Deontay and Claypool.
I would too, given the
Okay.
context of his position.
But like, you know, the guys around Deontay, if I assume I can't get back up to Mike Evans,
Right.
you know, it's Adam Thielen. Who cares? 6 touchdowns on Sunday coming.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen, low upside matchup. AJ Brown in a bad game. Jalen Waddle's fine, but like, you know, he doesn't have the biggest upside either. So like the guys around him have the same concerns he has, which I think is good for him because he is a better target share than they do. So I think that's a positive for Deontay. I'm not going to prioritize him just because the offense is what it is. But like, I'm not going to be totally out on him either. One question I have for you is relative to salary, Najee versus Joe Mixon.
I had a feeling that might be coming because I like Joe Mixon a lot.
Yeah.
I think I'm leaning Joe Mixon here. I played him last week. It worked out well. I like, dare I say, he has like a higher ceiling.
You're right. He's been in 4 perfect lineups this year. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Joe Mixon has been in 4 perfect lineups, like partly because running back has been pretty bad, but like he's got upside. He's had 123, 110. He had two games with 150 yards in scrimmage. Like he gets some good red zone work. He's 8,000, whereas Najee's 88. I prefer Najee. I want to say that. But like, I don't think it's outrageous to put Mixon above him. I like Najee more because against the Bengals, you funnel targets to the running back. We saw that was the Michael Carter, Ty Johnson game was against the Bengals. Like their linebackers are their biggest weakness, which is part of why I like Freiermuth a lot too. So that's why I think in terms of the Steelers side, I prefer Freiermuth 1, Najee 2, Deontay 3, Claypool 4. But both Najee and Freiermuth grade out well. Problem is Najee's below McCaffrey. I put him below Taylor despite the tough match for Taylor. He's definitely below Dalvin. So he's probably 4th among the 6 top guys for me. So I don't know. I'll still use him though. I want to say that.
It's strange. That's kind of what this led me to is like there are 4 viable plays from this team. Of course, Claypool's very much quaternary in that conversation. But I think that he fits within a game stack. And I think that this game is one of the more stackable because I think, at least for me, there's Tampa Bay, Indy, tier 1. Everything else is just clearly tier 2. This game for me is part of it, despite its concerns. Again, second time around divisional matchup, some pace concerns, some pass rate concerns to some degree. But as far as like which plays are going to go off if this game scores points, like it's got some value from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So I'll be higher on this game than I think a lot of people.
Okay. Well, one game I'll be higher on than others, I think, is Giants versus Eagles. Reasoning being here is pace. After the top three games, we're looking for these games we want to stack this week. And I think the Eagles Giants is pretty good, largely due to pace. Your pace numbers up on numberFire have this projected as the fastest game on the main slate. Am I correct in saying that? I think that's the case.
On the main slate, yes, I believe.
Okay, so they rank 10th and 11th in pace by your
See,
numbers in neutral situations.
If you let me have all my tabs open, I'd have been able to check, but you yell at me to close all my tabs.
Yeah, it slows your computer down and it drives me up a wall. I'm doing this for you. You should think about that. Anyway, it's first in pace by your numbers. And that's true even with the Eagles going full on establish it mode, because in their 4 games as a hyper run centric team, the Eagles have still averaged 66 plays per game on offense, and their opponents are at 63 per game. That's really good. It's led to an average total of 53.3 points per game across 2 sides. I thought it'd be bad that they were going run heavy, but it's kind of not, and it's fun. That's going to be enough to put me on Dallas Goddard here. $5,900. He is the most desirable piece in this Eagles offense right now. He's at 6.5 targets per game in his full games with no Ertz. Devontae Smith, slightly tougher sell. I love the talent, but he's at 6 targets per game in that stretch. That's a pretty low number for a receiver who's $6,400. The pace also at least makes me more interested in Jalen Hurts at $8,400 than I was on Monday. Not sure I will necessarily get there, but I'm less out on him than I was on Monday. The Giants just fired Jason Garrett, so that could lead to change, but we did see some predictable volume on Monday. Kadarius Toney had 12 targets, even if they were pretty shallow. That's how you want to play things against the Eagles, is shallow targets. We saw Tyreek Hill do well with that against them. Toney, $5,600. Saquon Barkley is 75. He played 59% of the snaps on Monday with 6 carries and 6 targets. Eagles are a much softer matchup for running backs, so interested there with Saquon Barkley. So I think some mini stacks here are very in play, specifically centered around Goddard with either Barkley or Toney. Devontae Smith, Miles Sanders also get a boost up here despite imperfect roles thanks to the pace here. So where are you at on this game and those guys?
Yeah, so this is, I think, a perfect example of how I'm viewing this slate, and it's starting to make more sense. Because again, we're doing this Wednesday, so it's already less research than normal, and we spent a lot of time digging into the Thanksgiving slate. But if I'm looking at the slate as one clear game and a big second tier, I want to go to where other people aren't, and that's very possibly this game. And like Steelers Bengals, as opposed to bigger value games like Rams Packers, things like that. So you make a lot of good points with this game. You make good points too with the fact that running the ball for the Eagles has not been bad, because look, we're analytics people. We don't like when teams try to establish the run. Historically, that's not led to winning. It's been passing more efficiently. However, the big caveat in all this is if you run the ball efficiently, that is viable. And over the past 4 games, since they've become really run heavy, the Eagles have put up 36.1 rushing net expected points. The Colts in that span are at 30.6. Makes sense. Next up is Baltimore at 15.6. Now, this doesn't adjust for total games or per carry. I'm just talking like sheer points added. They're able to move the ball efficiently. That's good. That's good stuff.
They're better. They have a higher expected points number on their rushing plays than their passing plays for the full season.
Yeah,
once we adjust for schedule.
And in the sample, 0.2 rushing net expected points per carry, 0.18 passing net expected points per drop back. That's really, really good offense. So that's the difference. If this were a team that just ran the ball into the back of the line and punted, that's bad. So I think I'm with you. The pass rate's going to look really bad, but that doesn't mean the offense is not performing. So it's a weird caveat to have to make, but I like it. And I like this game. Pretty easy places to go. Love Kadarius Toney. They've at times made him They're like, hey, Kadarius Toney got hurt a few weeks back, and it's like we didn't know what to do because he was our offense. And it's like if you come out and say that very clearly, like that means something. And you don't get that very often with a receiver in the 5,000 range. So just the sheer potential of that workload being what it is. I mean, I have some more stats on him because spoiler alert, he's one of my loves for this week. But boy, it's if this and this is another one of those games where like if it goes off, we know who's going to be producing.
I think that maybe I was too dismissive of Devontae Smith because like if I have a Saquon or a Tony lineup and I want to like assume that it goes off, he's probably going to do some things. So like standalone play, no. But if he's paired with Saquon or Tony, I'm okay with it. Where are you at on Saquon at $7,500?
I think he's more fine than like a target.
I agree.
I don't think I would get there in one-offs. I think it would require a game stack for me.
I want to get there though.
Sure.
I want him in my player pool. I do not want him to be a core play in my player pool. That's where I'm at. Okay. So we're on the same page there.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of quarterback here.
No. Sorry. It took me a second to realize what you're doing. No.
7,000.
No.
Like the game.
No.
Eagles below average against the pass.
No.
I mean,
no.
But tell me why.
Because no.
But like seriously, could you tell me why?
Because he's bad. We're talking about Daniel Jones, by the way, not Jalen Hurts. So I should make that clear.
Yeah. He's had a tough schedule.
I don't care. He had it last year too. No. We're moving on. Panthers, Cam Newton. There's a quarterback I can consider. You're talking about what the Panthers have looked like with Cam. What do you see in there?
I probably won't get to Daniel Jones, but
no. I'm cutting off my mic. Okay. You do what you want to. You talk about whatever you want to talk
about. So the Panthers with Cam Newton, I think it's relevant here because we are talking about how quarterbacks are very difficult for this week. So we got to at least consider or like look at Cam Newton. Plus, this offense holds one of the best running backs of football, if not the best, Christian McCaffrey. Potentially DJ Moore. We're looking at wanting some receivers in the 6,000 range. I think that's a little bit of a better role than it has been. So I want to dig into this offense. Through his 2 total games, Cam Newton has recorded an NFL average, basically 0.12 passing net expected points per drop back, 12 carries for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's just in line with expectation. And his ADOT is 4.2 yards. It's not really going to do a whole lot. Of course, if you throw in to Christian McCaffrey, that's going to lower your ADOT, but he's been viable, especially last week in that full game, 10 carries, 46 yards. That's nice. We know the potential's there. And last week with Newton in that full game, Christian McCaffrey led the team with 8 targets, which was 30%. DJ Moore had 7, which was 26%. Robbie Anderson had 6, which was 22%. And nobody else had more than 2 targets. So that's really concentrated work. That'll work even with a low ADOT, which again is drawn down toward the line of scrimmage with Christian McCaffrey getting so many targets. I'm not sure this game overall has the juice for stacking with such a low total, but I will have a lot of interest in McCaffrey. I think Cam Newton, DJ Moore stacks are kind of sneaky. I don't know what the read will be on Cam Newton's popularity numbers, but it's kind of classic Cam Newton where he's going to run the ball maybe 8 to 12 times with some efficiency on those, throw the ball a little bit, but he's definitely not like a Kyler Murray or anything where he's running and throwing for a full game's worth of passing production. But 6,700 with potentially let's call it a 25+% target share. If that's the way that this offense is going to work, that's pretty viable for DJ Moore if you're interested in this offense. I think the bigger question is with Christian McCaffrey in games with low totals. We've talked like with McCaffrey back this year and with low offensive expectations that like, oh yeah, Christian McCaffrey's played in a lot of games with low totals because these offenses have been bad. So I went back and looked. In games where McCaffrey in his career has played at least 60% of the snaps, he's averaged 20.8 FanDuel points per game, which is sick. Like that's so sick. In games with totals of 45 or lower, He's averaged 17.3 FanDuel points. That includes 7 of 21 games with more than 20 FanDuel points, but also 7 of 21 with 10.5 or fewer points. Of his 8 career games with at least 30 FanDuel points, just 2 came with totals under 46. Of his 27 games with at least 20 FanDuel points, the average over-under was 47 points, and only 5 of these, which is 18%, came in games with totals of 44 or lower. So I kind of thought he had a lot more bigger games in these low totals. He hasn't really had nearly as many games with low totals as my memory kind of said that he did. But just 9 of his 50 games with at least 60% of the snaps had totals of 42.5 or lower. So it hasn't really quite been what I thought. He still averaged 19.3 FanDuel points in these games, but that did feature outputs of 44.7, 36.1, and 25.5. 2 of these games came with 3 touchdowns despite the low totals. So the path to upside, even in bad games for him, is there. But he also had 11.3 FanDuel points per game and the other 6 with a lot of dud outputs, which is concerning. So what all this boils down to is, like, in games with low totals, Christian McCaffrey still has that juice. He's got that win juice. But also the odds of a dud from Christian McCaffrey, like the bad games from him, come in games like this. And that's concerning to me. So I don't want to just say, like, oh, Christian McCaffrey's back and he's going to get his, 8+ targets or whatever. And he's going to have yardage upside. The touchdown equity might not be there, even though we've seen eruption games. So I'm having a hard time trying not to overthink this, but also not just going blindly and saying Christian McCaffrey is totally fine, even though this over-under is terrible. So what do you think about McCaffrey this week? And any thoughts on Cam Newton plus DJ Moore?
Yeah, I think that the analysis of McCaffrey makes a lot of sense, and it's fair to view things that way. I also kind of just don't care, in part because, like, total matters most with regards to touchdown upside and play volume, because it does reflect both those things. Pace in this game's not bad between the two teams, so I think that that's a positive. I think this game goes over because I think that Tua's better than public perception. I think that Cam might be better than public perception right now, which is great. So I think this game goes over 42. I think that's a positive for McCaffrey. Other thing is his, like, non-touchdown totals this year specifically have been like, oh my gosh. So this was, I ran this before last week, but through week 10, there were 4 instances where a running back scored 20 FanDuel points and no touchdowns. 2 of those were by Christian McCaffrey in his 3 full games to that point in the year. Like, how stupid is that? He's at 153, I think, yards per game in his full games, 151, 47% red zone share. I think he'll still get red zone working with Cam being there. So I think the workload is so good in this specific context. And I think the game goes over to the point where I think that he's still the number 1 back on this slate. And I want to get there for cash games if I can. Really, really would like to get there for cash games. I would need some good value backs to pass him up. I also prefer him over Dalvin, and I like Dalvin a lot if we're talking about, like, in terms of prioritization for cash games. So I think that that's a big thing for me.
Yeah. Despite all the concerns I laid out, despite the paths to busting, he's still my number 1.
Yeah.
Overall, I'm with you. Like, I don't think it's as safe as it would be in a game with a higher total for sure, which is not groundbreaking, but it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't score a touchdown this week, if the total does kind of hit or goes below. But even with that, it's really hard to pass him up.
Where are you at on the Cam and then the Dolphins? Just quickly.
Cam, I think, is viable for game stacks. I don't think I would play him as a one-off. If I'm going to play him, I'd at least take a chance on DJ Moore.
Cam or Jalen Hurts?
I think Cam for me.
Okay, I might prefer Hurts just because the pace in that game is better. That might be the one.
Yeah, actually, I should. Yeah, I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna go Hurts.
Okay.
And then the Dolphins, just bring backs if I'm playing Cam Newton, basically.
Does that include the gas boy? Because he's popping in some stuff, and I really don't want to go there.
He's been popping in my simulations for weeks now, but watching him is the least inspired I've ever felt watching a running back that I'm rooting for.
It's like Rory. If you use him, just don't watch. Like,
Yeah.
you gotta avoid at all costs. I don't want to go there because he's at 66 yards per game in the 5 games with no Malcolm Brown. And I think the Panthers defensive line is going to embarrass the Dolphins offensive line. I think the same thing could happen on the other side too, honestly, because the Panthers offensive line is so bad. That's why I'm not like banging the table about the over on this game. But I do think that the gas boy doesn't quite do enough for me. So it'd be more Waddle and Gesicki.
So where would you rank him among value backs? Like, is
Behind Sanders, definitively.
Yeah.
Behind Jeff Wilson if there's no Eli Mitchell. Behind AJ Dillon, I think that's enough where I just wouldn't get to him.
I wouldn't quite consider Dillon in the same tier, but
yeah, fair.
If I really had to, I'd play him, but I think I would rather just go like chalky, like heavy exposure to Miles Sanders instead.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Okay, let's finish up with our third or final trend here, talking about that Chargers-Broncos game you alluded to, because it's a decently high total of 47.5, tight spread, fun players on both sides, but both defenses also come from the Vic Fangio tree, and the thesis of that defense is to prevent big plays, and for the most part, both sides have done that. On the season, the Broncos have let up more than 270 passing yards to just 2 quarterbacks. None of the quarterbacks they faced have scored more than 21.5 FanDuel points. That's gross. Other positions have been a bit better, but still underwhelming. No player at any position has scored more than 23.8 FanDuel points against the Broncos. Only Chase Claypool and Sterling Shepard have had 100 yards receiving against them. Dearness Johnson, who's the best running back on the planet, of course, and Najee Harris are the only backs with 100 yards, and both those guys needed 22-plus carries to get there. So we don't get many upside games against the Broncos. Same thing is mostly true for the Chargers. No players top 25 FanDuel points against them. Of the 8 players to top 20 FanDuel points, 4 of them came from the same game, that Browns-Chargers shootout. It was Baker. Baker did it too in that game somehow. Wild times that happened this year. The main appealing options on the Broncos are wide receivers, but Devontae Smith is the lone receiver to get 20 FanDuel points against the Chargers. He has a higher target share than anybody on this team. So I think I'm out on all Denver players except for Noah Fant. Austin Eckler could work on the Chargers side. He's $8,400, which is pretty reasonable. I just don't know if I'll like him more than Dalvin Cook, which is a pretty big downside for me. So this game looks good on paper, and it might feature points, but the style of defense that both sides play is not conducive to big fantasy games. So do you have a different view of this game than I do? Am I overthinking it? What are your thoughts?
I like Eckler still regardless, just because everything should sort of funnel toward him. I struggle with Denver on even smaller slates because their market shares can be very dispersed. So I want to like this game. I almost wrote up Justin Herbert as a quarterback love. I couldn't quite get there because I feel like the path to that huge game is capped. I don't want to play guys with capped ceilings. Mike Williams has too many target share concerns. I think this one could have some mini stacks if I play Eckler. If I can't quite get to McCaffrey, I already played Dalvin. I'm going to go Dalvin, Eckler in a lineup. I would consider like a Jerry Jeudy just as like a mini stack, but that's, I think, my cap.
Judy's a really talented player, so I'm not going to talk you out of that. I'd probably go Eckler Fant though, personally, just because Fant fills tight end, has some yardage upside, so that's where I'm at there.
I have a quick note on McCaffrey in games with no touchdowns but 20 plus FanDuel points.
Yes, do it.
Since 2017, which is when he entered the league, I did this quickly if my numbers are right, there have been 24 instances of a running back getting to 20 plus FanDuel points with no touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
He has 8 of those, so he has a third by himself.
What a guy. What a guy. He's great. We're going to go to our position plays. No weather for this week. So we're recording Wednesday. So, check back on the numberFire games and lineups page on Sunday morning to see what the weather says then. But for right now, Brandon at quarterback, what do you have for the Week 12 main slate?
Well, if anyone's been listening at all, they know it's Tom Brady, number 1. This is the best game of the week by a good margin for me. Brady has that clear path that we talked about, the wide open green pasture to big production with multiple touchdowns in this game. He has stacking options that are, gives us multiple access points to a big game from Brady, but also kind of reasonable salaries for the most part. Indianapolis is 27th against the pass, according to numberFire's adjusted pass defense metrics. Brady in games against bottom 20 pass defenses, 26.1 FanDuel points per game, 308 yards per game, 3.2 passing touchdowns per game, 0.34 passing net expected points per dropback, which is over 3 times the NFL average. You gotta love that. My second love comes from a game that I did discuss with the other side here, but if I'm if I'm not playing Brady, I might as well try to save some salary. So I'll really be open to Joe Burrow at 7,100. Just extra savings there. It helps me get back up to another stud running back. Burrow's offensive line matchup isn't that bad based on the current health against the Steelers, who are 27th in pressure rate by Next Gen Stats and Pro Football Focus's chart. Doesn't have this one, their offensive line, defensive line matchups, which accounts for health. Doesn't really say it's a red flag matchup here. Pittsburgh 17th in adjusted pass defense, according to numberFire. I know it's a second time around defensive matchup with some bad overall peripherals, but if I play Burrow, I can play Jamar Chase. I can play Joe Mixon with Joe Burrow as well. And then I can bring it back with like a Deontay Johnson, which is a high floor play, or a Pat Freiermuth. So I think for a value quarterback, there's a lot to like here.
Yeah, there's enough where I consider him too. My two loves are Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, going with the olds here for this week. For Brady, it's the 5th ranked passing offense versus the 27th ranked passing defense. The Bucs have a 65% pass rate in the red zone, which is the second highest mark in the league. And that helps. $8,200, clear stacking candidates. I think he's number 1 by a mile. Rodgers, 2 out of necessity, I guess, just because there aren't a lot of other good options. There could be wind in this game, which would lower me on Matthew Stafford, but Rodgers, I believe Chris Allen has these numbers, but I'm pretty sure, thinking back to Chris Allen's previous work, Rodgers' win splits are not that bad because he's played it a lot and just is not fazed by it. So I do think that Rodgers would be number 2 for me at $7,900. I would consider Stafford, would consider Kirk Cousins, considering Hurts and Newton. Right now, I think I'm at Brady, Rodgers, Hurts based on the pace discussion we had previously about the Eagles versus Giants game.
So no thoughts on going down at quarterback at all?
I think it's the right thought process. I just can't quite get there. It's the right thought process though, so I can't knock it personally.
Okay, I got you.
All right, what you got at running back?
I think McCaffrey would really be my number 1, but if I'm being realistic and trying to build the best top to bottom lineups I can, that might not allow me to get to McCaffrey extremely often. So I'm cool going with Austin Eckler at 8,400. Again, it is a week where I want to allocate salary, but Eckler really sets up well, and I'm not chasing the touchdowns. It's just a good roll. 70% snap rate, 25 adjusted opportunities stemming from 7 targets. Denver, not a good rush defense matchup anyway. 26th in rushing net expected points per carry allowed to running backs. 17th in adjusted FanDuel points per target as well allowed to running backs. So just a base level matchup out of the backfield. Second level is going to be Dalvin Cook at 8,100. I think the salary is too low. He is 3rd in my early floor ceiling ratio numbers across my slate simulations. The 49ers are a top 10 rush defense in rushing net expected points per carry and success rate allowed to running backs, but the game environment's there, even though it's not necessarily flawless for me. 69+% snap rate in 5 straight games with an average of 76% as well. And my third love, and this really shouldn't change unless we get Aaron Jones back, but it's going to be A.J. Dillon at 6,900. The results weren't quite there last week, but the role was confirmed, I think, at a pretty solid role. 74% snap rate, 23 adjusted opportunities, ran 17 routes with 6 targets. If you give me that rushing share, which was 73% of the running back carries, 15% target share within this offense, I don't care whose name it is. If it's at 6,900, I'm going to take that.
And if it's a guy who looks like A.J. Dillon, I'll take it every time.
That's true.
So that helps as well. He's my third love too. And I had Dalvin Cook as my number 2 love. So overlapping there, I think that relative to salary, those 2 guys are the ones that stand out most as being missalaried. My top love is Christian McCaffrey. It's a tough matchup for Jonathan Taylor. That does not make me off of Jonathan Taylor. I want to make that very clear. Indy's personnel is very good, but it's Christian McCaffrey. And I think that we have a really good option here. He didn't just go for 5 touchdowns. So McCaffrey to me makes a lot of sense. Again, 151 yards per game in his 4 full games, 33.5 carries plus 2x targets per game, 47% red zone share. He is under salaried, should be probably like 10. I think we said 10 for Taylor, 9-8 for McCaffrey on Monday. That's probably fair, but I think that either way, very willing to get there in a game I think goes over the total for this week. So McCaffrey, Cook, and Dillon, my 3 loves. I would say, though, I am higher on Miles Sanders now than I was when we started. Slowly inching that thing up, becoming more interested there. Let's go to wide receiver. Who are you turning to there?
I'm going to go with Chris Godwin at 7,600. I will say I prefer Mike Evans, but I think Chris Godwin will be a little bit less popular. His role hasn't been quite as good as Evans's in games without Antonio Brown and with Gronk. But that first game in that sample was against the Rams, and Godwin saw a pretty good number of routes against Jalen Ramsey, who's been awesome in the slot this year. And if you look at the past 4 games without Antonio Brown, Godwin has a team best 23% target share, 22% weighted target share, which is just a metric that I use that looks at your target share, your red zone target share, and your downfield target share. 93 yards per game as well, and obviously stacks with Tom Brady. Second loves Michael Pittman Jr. I just can't really pass him up. I can't rank anyone above him in the 6,000 range with his really good target market share in a game where his team should probably throw a little bit more than normal. And I like him anyway. So just kind of injecting him into a good matchup. In his games with T.Y. Hilton, Pittman Jr. has an 88% snap rate, 95% route rate, 7 targets per game. It's just 24%, 3.8 high leverage targets per game. I mean, I'm gonna take that, even though Tampa Bay's been pretty good once adjusting for opponents faced against wide receivers. And my third love is Kadarius Toney down at 5,600. This game, as you mentioned, pretty sneakily fun for this week. Toney had a 33% target share, 40% air yard share with 2 downfield, 2 red zone targets last week. Was targeted on 48% of his routes in that game. We have seen and heard the Giants try to make him a focal point, and he has been targeted on virtually the same rate of his routes as Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, and A.J. Brown.
Seems good.
Seems good.
Good company to keep. My top 11 receiver is Mike Evans, $7,500. If we look at the games with Gronk and without Antonio Brown, so it's a 2-game sample, but hey, whatever. 21% target share, 38% of the deep targets for Evans in those 2 games, double-digit targets in both. The Colts corners are not the strength of that team. So I just want a lot of exposure to him, exposure to that game. I do like Godwin too. I know I was kind of yelling at you on Slack about that last night, but it was mostly joking. I think he's fine. No objections. I have Michael Pittman as my second love too, for a lot of the same reasons. I looked at the target shares in games with Hilton. 40% deep target share, 33% in the red zone, $6,600. They don't throw a lot in the red zone, so that's kind of a fluky stat. But still, I do think that he is at 66 a priority for this week. My value play that I like most is Van Jefferson. Odell should get more work, but when Robert Woods is getting a 20% target share, Van was still getting a 17% share. In the past 4 games, with 3 of those with Woods, 1 with Odell / Ben Skoranek, who combined for 8 targets. Van had a 17% target share. He had 42% of the deep targets and a 20% red zone share. He's $5,400. I think Van Jefferson is a star value play for this week and a guy I want to build around. Toney would be my number 2, I think, followed by MVS, followed by Marv, right?
Yep.
Boom. Go to tight end. What you got there?
I have Kyle Pitts here at 6,600. It's $100 lower than George Kittle, who I do like plenty, but Pitts is, I think, an easy pivot. Has had 4 straight down games, but now faces the Jaguars, who are 29th in player level adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to tight ends. The Vikings, who Kittle's facing, are second. That's a little bit worrisome. But Pitts has a 22% target share in 5 games without Calvin Ridley, 21% red zone target share as well. We know the upside is there with the yardage if Matt Ryan looks at all decent. And my second love would be Dan Arnold within the same game, 5,100. I think people will just write him off entirely like Jim is doing. Just
literally
just writing him off.
I wrote his name down just to cross it off.
No targets last week, but 22 routes, which was second best on the team. And the Falcons are 27th in those player level adjusted fantasy points per target allowed to tight ends. If you go back to week 5, since his role improved with the Jaguars, even with a no target game factored in, Arnold ranks 12th among all tight ends in target share. So don't bail on him yet if you really need to save salary.
Yeah, you mentioned Pitts. I do like Pitts a decent amount, but I will go with Kittle as my top one because it's my favorite access to the San Francisco side of this pretty fun game. $6,700. He has 6.3 targets per game since his return, but like that's on low volume. If they'd throw more, which they could against a good passing offense, his target share is 24%. I think that Kittle is good access to a great game. Phil's tight end, which isn't too bad this week, honestly, but like I'd still don't mind filling it. So $6,700, very fair for me. My second love is Pat Freiermuth with Eric Ebron likely out. That's a big thing for Freiermuth, given the route rates he has with and without Ebron. He had a 21% target share in 2 games that Ebron missed. It was down to 17% in 2 games since Ebron returned. He gets a lot of work in the red zone, and at the salary, you need like 40 yards and a touchdown, and you're like paying off a tight end. So he can do that. He can get 2 touchdowns too. So Freiermuth, to me, really good low salary tight end. Firm over Arnold. I don't think that you're wrong to consider Arnold. I just think I prefer Freiermuth. Defense. Where are we going here?
I'm going to go with the Chargers at 3,600. There's a high enough total. They're favored, and that's kind of the recipe you want for fantasy points. You want sacks and turnovers. Teddy Bridgewater has an 8% sack rate. It's 9th among qualified quarterbacks. Garrett Bowles likely out. Is that a thing? Did I do good?
I think they confirmed that yesterday. I was
But
reading.
like, that's relevant?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
CeeDee Lamb's practicing today too. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Let's go. And the Chargers are 3rd in pressure rate.
Yeah, I think that works. $3,600 is low for a team with that defensive talent. I know Teddy doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but the sacks matter. But I still think that's a pretty good play. I like the Bengals because I don't know why they're $3,300. I will use Freiermuth in the same lineup as the Bengals defense. I don't care. They're just aggressively under salary. They're 4.5-point home favorites against Ben Roethlisberger, who can't move. They are the 9th ranked defense versus the 24th ranked offense. So although I like Freiermuth, I'm okay with Najee, I still think that the Bengals defense is very good. I would not use the Bengals defense with Najee, would use them with Freiermuth for this week. I also do think the Dolphins work as a pivot at $3,400 because that defensive line is so bad. The Dolphins, very aggressive defense, which is good for defensive scoring. So I think that they would work too. So the Bengals, Dolphins are both the main ones I would turn to in the bottom range. And then the Chargers would be up there too, as far as lower salary defenses. Okay, Brandon, we went long. So any final thoughts for you on this slate?
Just do your best to stay tuned to the news.
Tune out for now. Tune back in Sunday. Yes. Go spend time with your family. But yeah, make sure you're properly valuing the news. Think about it. Think about situations and how you would handle those things for sure. That is all that we have here for today. Again, if you have not checked out the Thanksgiving podcast and you're listening to this before then, go back to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed or the FanDuel YouTube page. Check it out there and get yourself entered for what should be a slate. That is for sure. Brandon, people have questions for you on Twitter. Where can they find you there?
I'm at Goodula13, GDULA13.
And I'm at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck with your DFS lineups, both for the main slate and the Thanksgiving slate. Happy Thanksgiving. Have a safe and happy holiday. We'll talk to you once again on Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.